Nice to see you all. Welcome to another episode of the Paint and Pipette podcast. It's great to be back in the new year. I am joined today by an incredible thought leader and coach and mentor to many actual mutual friends of ours and actually co-instructor at Stanford University. Diana Chapman, welcome.
Hello, so happy to be here with you.
I'm so happy to get to have this conversation. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know you are home. Where is home for you? Define home for our humble listenership.
Well, my physical home is in Aptos, California, just outside of Santa Cruz. And I'm out here on a horse ranch that I'm renovating into a retreat center. And so it's a dream come true for me in this last year to create this.
Okay, you told me something yesterday, though, that you are home yourself, wherever you are. So tell us about that worldview or that philosophy as well.
Yeah, I just, when I'm at peace in here, when I'm really comfortable being me, there's just this sense of, so wherever I go, and I've traveled a lot in my life all around the world, that I can just create home wherever I'm at. And this is home for now until wherever I go next. But it's an experience of well-being inside, like a deep sense of safety inside, control inside, approval inside that helps me feel I'm at home.
You know, the old adage, wherever you go, there you are. I think a lot of times that's meant, I don't want to say it's a threat, but it's a warning. You know, you can't escape your problems. But then the flip side of it is, if you are home, wherever you go, there you are.
There you are.
It's beautiful. So I wanted to, for folks who don't know your work, I thought it might be kind of cool to start with a little bit of your lineage, so to speak. I understand that you're a student of Gay Hendricks.
Yes.
And I thought it might be cool for folks who don't know his work. Tell us a little bit about the Big Leap and some of the ideas that first drew you to this way of being in the world.
Yeah, Gay and Kathleen Hendricks started the Hendricks Institute many, many years ago. And I had a sister-in-law who gifted me a training there. And she and her husband thought it'd be a good idea for my husband and I to go and maybe help our marriage a bit. Okay. And so we trotted off to California to take a training, and it was like somebody turned the lights on. And this was back, gosh, early 30 years ago, maybe. And I had the thought, why am I only now getting these tools? These tools should have been taught to me when I was a child. All of these very practical, embodied ways to not get reactive and to create really beautiful relationships with other people and myself. And so I remember I vowed then and there, I'm going to spend the rest of my life figuring out how to get these tools out to as many people as I can. And that was the beginning of a new era for me.
That's incredible. So you say the lights came on. Can you describe first, before I want to hear about the lights coming on and what does that mean? What was dark? But where were you in your life? What were you doing when you encountered the Hendricks Institute and their teaching?
Where was I? I was a stay-at-home mom, very, very much in love with that role. I was heading up the parent-teacher, group at school. I was very involved in fundraising in my community. And I also was part of a group that had started an interfaith center in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where I was living at the time. And so I guess I would say I was a community leader and a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
And I was just also a seeker. I really was interested in, what are the things that allow us to be more present, have better relationships, be more creative, etc. And I'd done a lot of things, but when I got to the Hendricks, they really pointed out this idea of how people get caught in victimhood and how people can get codependent and be at the effect of one another and at the effect of the world as a whole. And that was new to me. Those tools were really game-changing. And I got to see how my husband and I were codependent and how that was costing both of us and our children and my other relationships with parents, my siblings, my friends. So I just dove in deep, like changed my whole life to be able to start to practice these things right away.
Well, the way you described yourself in the beginning, head of the PTA, et cetera, it sounds like you're kind of the model citizen. what was it? What part of life, if the lights came on, so to speak, what part of life was dark, and what changed, or what does it mean when you say the lights came on?
I would say the lights came on to the recognition that I am the creator of my suffering,
Mm.
that there's nothing really out there that causes me suffering, which is a radical concept,
Hmm. Hmm.
but that I interpret what's going on out there and I argue with it. And when I do that, I create upset for myself, and that I
Okay.
actually have agency to change that. And I have tools to know how to do that now so that I don't have to be in reactivity. I don't have to be in stress if I don't want to.
Can you just even take us back, if you will, if you're willing,
Yeah.
into kind of the mindset that you held then when you say that you create your own suffering? What is or is that the phrase?
Yes.
So what was the suffering? Can you give us an example of some suffering that you were creating that you realized that the light, dawned upon you? You go, this is actually me doing this.
Yeah. They're little things like, oh, how come my husband always tells me he's going to be home at a certain time and then he's always late?
Mm.
And then I don't feel cared for, and then we have a fight, and then I'm tired because I feel like I do too much to support the kids, or how come I can't get everybody at school to get involved, and how come there's just a few of us doing all the work, and this is tiring, and I feel at the effect of it,
Mm.
and gosh, I'm putting money out to help create this next part of the school. Can other people do that? And why is this so hard? And this isn't any fun. And and how come my mom still gets reactive with me, and I can't stand being around her for more than 3 days? And and then that affects whether we want to spend time with her. And
I like the how come, that how come kind of phrase. I think is because that's something I can, how come, you fill in the blank. I bet anybody listening right now they've got their whole list of how comes.
yeah,
And what you're saying is you are, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you are the cause of those how comes.
I am the creator of the reactivity, because how come has this mindset like it should be different than it is. Well, the moment I start saying life should be different than it is, I'm going to start suffering
Hmm.
instead of, well, this is the way life is right now. Would you first be willing to allow it to be as it is without making it bad or wrong?
Hmm.
Would you just welcome, accept it? And then maybe you might want to be part of changing it, but only after you've allowed it to be as it is. And
And so, I mean, take your husband coming home late. What is the shift there? What's the paradigm shift from how come he's always late to he is late? How do I respond? Does the mode or does the emphasis shift to your response?
yes, so first of all, it's, hey, he comes home late. Can you just accept he's a man who comes home late? And then let's get curious. How do I co-create with him coming home later than he says he's going to come home? What's my
Mm.
part in that? If this is my movie, what am I doing that sets that up over and over again? And so one of the things I work with clients on is teach me a class. If you too want to have your partner come home late the way I do, here's what you'd need to do. And I
Wow.
start to take a look at, well, I don't actually make really clear agreements with him. And I do criticize him when he does call to say he wants to renegotiate. So I set it up that he just won't call then because he doesn't want to get criticized. And
Mm.
I am intolerant of some of his own needs. So I can see, oh, I set it up. This isn't happening to me. This is happening by me.
Wow.
But I can only really take responsibility once I've accepted that, yeah, this is what I've set up.
I like that phrase, teach me a class. It reminded me of something that as I was doing some research to prepare for this conversation, I loved this phrase. You said, the thing you're complaining about is the thing you're committed to creating.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that? I mean, that phrase was so powerful to me. The thing you're complaining about is the thing you're committed to creating. I think a lot of people go, I'm not, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, yeah. And that's what I mean by the lights went on. It was like, what? What? I'm creating this. So let me give you an example. I had a VP of a company who called me to say, the CEO is my manager and I get no good feedback from him. And I'm really frustrated. I'm thinking about leaving. So I said, okay, teach me the class. How have you created not getting feedback? And he was like that at first, like, wait, what? That isn't,
Not
I
on
get
me.
the feedback. I tell everybody, I go, I know you tell everybody you want feedback, but survey says it's not true. How do we know? You're not getting feedback. So he starts to go in and go, well, he cancels meetings a lot and I don't say anything.
Hmm.
So, so I don't have as much time with him. Okay, great. That starts it out. I said, how come you don't say anything? Well, I have a belief his time is more valuable than mine. Oh, okay. So I'd have to believe that too. Okay,
Wow.
what else? Well, I don't actually ask for feedback. And so when we were in our meetings, I let him drive the agenda. So on and on he went, and it was like,
This is his class
yeah,
on
this
how
is his
you create the
class.
conditions where you're not getting
Yeah.
feedback.
And then
Yeah.
he was like, okay, I get it now. I can just go do the opposite of all these things and I'd be getting the feedback I want.
I could start requesting a reschedule. I could start valuing my time. I could start being direct about it. And
Yeah.
now instead of complaining that I'm not getting feedback, I recognize I'm committed to creating not getting feedback.
Yeah. And he actually went and said, hey, I want to let you know, I've been committed to not getting good feedback from you.
Wow.
And he owned it. And I want to tell you, here's how I've been doing it. And here's what I'd like to do instead. And they completely changed the pattern.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. And so how do you get to how does someone get to that point? You used a phrase. I don't know if it makes sense to come into play here, but I've heard you say probably 3 times just right now, at the effect of.
Yeah.
Can you tell like why? I mean, I assume that phrase means something. What does that mean to you? And how is that different from reality,
Yeah.
perhaps?
So at the effect of means I'm letting life affect me. So for example, right now it's a little foggy outside, right? Some people go, oh, I'm not in a good mood because the fog.
Hmm.
It's dreary out. So now I'm dreary. Well, the fog hasn't created my dreariness necessarily, although we might have a little bit of information about how sun does affect well-being, but I have a lot to do with whether I'm going to be dreary with the fog or not. And
Hmm.
a lot of that will have to do with, am I willing to appreciate the fog, value the fog, welcome the fog, or I'm going to argue that a sunny day is better than a foggy day, and then I'm going to be at the effect of it. So we
And
can be
so
at the effect of an email coming in. We see somebody's name and we're like, oh no, so and so's emailing me. And uh, I'm already feeling frustration because, and I make up a story, it's because the email and that person are a problem.
one thing, I think I told you this when we were chatting the other day. I've taught for years with Bernie Roth, who's or was until very recently the academic director of the D School. And he has he is on a vendetta against reasons because he sees that reasons they're just justification. They're basically a glorified excuse that is a projection of what you want. So I felt it this morning. I was meeting a CEO for breakfast who's a client of mine. And granted, it should take me 35 minutes to get over the hill to be there on time. But of course I wake up and it's raining. I'm 30 minutes away and I'm running the script on why the rain is making me late. Right. And then I have like this metacognition. It's like I don't want to give any reason, but I don't want to be unreasonable, and I don't want to be late without an excuse. And the truth is, I should have just left earlier. But now I'm in a situation where I haven't left earlier. It's actually going to take me longer, and I don't want to be the kind of person who gives reasons to justify behavior. What do you do? It just shows how neurotic I am. What do you do at that level of being in the world? It's one thing to act at the state of leaving earlier.
Yeah.
It's another thing to act at the state of representing my behavior and my implicit values. How do you think about that? I realize there's a lot in that question, but I think I'm wondering how'd you get your former client, as you were describing, to the point where he could express he was not getting the feedback he needed. And then I was just playing through a real example of something that I'm going with. But how do you get somebody to the point where they're able to actually intersect with where their reality distortion field is causing problems?
Mhm. Well, first of all, I have my clients commit, and commit from the Latin origin committere, which means to gather your energy and move it in a chosen direction. So he was committed to being revealed versus concealed.
Hmm.
He was committed to feeling his feelings and letting his others around him feel theirs. He was committed to taking radical responsibility. He was committed to getting curious. So those commitments then help anchor a sense of well-being that then help you navigate around. So for example, you might commit
Hmm.
to candor, which means, hey, I want to let you know I'm late to this meeting, and I can feel the part of me that's scared that you might think I'm, irresponsible or don't care about you. And I want to just let you know that part of me is here. And
Hmm.
also there's some sadness that I didn't anticipate the weather and come earlier. And I feel some loss about that. And I just want to let you know, just share with you that I feel that regret, and I want to know, how does it impact you that I've shown up late here today? And
Hmm.
so it's just a no problem. There's no problem that I've shown up late. I've shown up late. It's just what happens sometimes. And what do I get to learn? What do you get to learn? How does showing up late create more connection, be more authentic? There's so many things I get to experience showing up late that I might not have if I showed up on time.
Well,
So
again, it's just this radical orientation to what is what
yeah,
stands out to me.
yeah,
I feel there's more, and perhaps we can go into the victim triangle at some, or the drama triangle rather, but there's almost this, I wish it wasn't. I'm starting from the position of, I wish it wasn't. What do I do given that it is, but I wish it wasn't? And what you're saying is, forget what you wish. Here's
yeah.
what is. That's kind of
It
what
is.
I'm
I'm a
pulling out of
man.
what you're saying.
And one of the things that I like to do is help people separate out facts from stories.
Hmm.
Because actually, what's true is, what was it, like 9 a.m., or what time did you agree to meet?
7:30.
7:30. Man says to other client, meet you at 7:30. Man shows up at what time?
7:34.
7:34. So if we're just like watching a black and white movie of man says be there at 7:30, man walks in door at 7:34. If we can't add any stories to that, we just see the facts. Is there any problem if you just watch the movie and just look at the facts?
Well, I see a misalignment there, or
That's a story.
maybe.
That's a story.
Ah, okay.
And it's the story that causes you to get reactive. I'm right. It was misaligned. I'm right. I shouldn't be misaligned. Now I'm going to create stress.
Hmm.
Instead of, man said he'd be there and then man wasn't there. Okay. No, there's no problem there until you interpret. And your interpretation is all arguable.
Hmm. And so this is actually a great example just because it's real. I actually feel it in my body right now. It's always a good
Right.
indication, right?
Right.
So the going back to the black and white film, maybe how do you think about changing that narrative, or stripping that narrative, and more broadly relieving the burden to impose a narrative? Because I find it's like I almost can't see that black and white film without imposing an interpretation.
Sure. But then your practice is to go, oh, I'm making up stories.
Hmm.
And it's just a story, and part of me thinks it's true, and would I be willing to argue the other side? That, because even late is a story. There are my experiences, sometimes people show up past when they said, anyway, they were right on time because I had something else going on. Like, I don't know if you were late. You showed up when you showed up, and for many, that's just when it is.
I had the experience yesterday. It's funny you say that, where I had a call, call it 9 a.m., whatever it was. And I'm scrambling to make it there. And I arrive at 9:03 or something. And the line's blank. And it's a gentleman in New York who he got on at 9:04 going, I'm so sorry. And I go, to be honest, if you had arrived 30 minutes earlier, I'd be the one saying, I'm sorry.
Right.
Let's call it Ethan.
Right. Right. It's just like, well, that's what time life wanted to gather.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so many should that culture imposes on us, and then when we think it's right, we're, "Ah!"
So can I ask you this though? How does that mesh with, or harmonize with your belief in radical responsibility?
Yeah.
Because to me, the way that I interpret, again, the story I impose upon this idea of responsibility, maybe we could start by telling folks what the commitment to responsibility or taking responsibility is, but then how does that jive with not having shoulds?
Yes. So that doesn't mean I'm still committed. I'm committed to keeping 90% of my agreements, knowing 10% of the time life's going to happen in a way I don't have control over that's likely going to take me offline.
Hmm.
So I do my best to do that. And I won't always be perfect. And every time I'm not, I learn, how did I create not keeping that agreement? So, for example, you and I made an agreement that I would show up here at, I think it was 9:45, and I didn't look at my calendar closely enough because I usually don't have appointments at the 45, so I just
Hmm.
assumed it was 10,
Hmm.
and so I'm not there when I made an agreement to. So, I can take a look at, "Oh, I was out of integrity with myself. I didn't keep my time agreement with you, and I really wanna take responsibility for making agreements with people for what I keep." And so one thing I could do is to say, "Oh, I need to have somebody," because my mind works a certain way that I'll just keep hooking it to the top of the hour. So I could ask my assistant, "Hey, I want to remind you this is not a top of the hour meeting."
Hmm.
And that would be helpful actually to me. Or I need to get up earlier and really study my calendar to see because it can trip me up when I go out of my rhythms. So there's ways I can learn to do it differently, and I do. It matters to me. I want to be somebody who you can count on to keep my word as best I can, and it's okay when I don't. I'm human. And I
Mhm.
think that's the thing is it's a yes and.
Hmm.
I wanna be somebody who is in integrity with their agreements, and I'm human, and I'm learning.
And the should part of the equation is, to me, what I'm just processing is it fails to account for one, the kind of human element, and two, the gift of learning that comes when the should is not, so to speak.
Yes,
Hmm. Hmm.
yes.
Yeah. So you said something about feeling your feelings. That was a phrase that you just mentioned, and that reminds me. Jane Chen, who I know is a mutual friend of ours, she and I were in business school together. She went on to start an amazing company that's saved 500,000 babies' lives around the world. She's an incredible entrepreneur. I had texted her saying, "Hey, I'm interviewing Diana. Do you have any questions?" Because I know that she's a real student of your work. And this is what she said. I wanted to read it to you, and because it's related to this idea of feeling your feelings. She said, "One thing you could ask Diana about is the commitment to feel all your feelings, which I find is so difficult, even if it seems easy. One of the things she teaches is that you can feel all of your feelings from above the line or below the line. You could ask her how to feel difficult emotions like anger or grief from above the line." So
Mm.
tell us about this idea of feeling all your feelings. Why is it so difficult, even though it sounds easy? And then maybe we can get into the difficult emotions later.
Okay. So emotions, when we experience them, they live in the body as sensations. And for many of us, it seems uncomfortable to be with those sensations, so then we don't wanna be with the emotions.
Hmm.
So, for example, sadness usually shows up here in the chest, a tightening of the chest or a narrowing of the throat. And if we don't want to be with those, we'll, you'll see people that stuff it, stuff it down, and they'll push back on it. Anger usually shows up in the back, the neck, the shoulders, the jaw. We call it the hackle zone.
Huh.
If you don't want to be with that, you're going to, I'm fine. I'm doing everything I can to suppress how pissed off I am right now.
Hmm.
And fear usually shows up in the belly, flip-flopping, nausea, those things. And if I don't want to be with that uncomfortable belly, then I'm going to do everything I can to try to distract myself from fear.
Yeah.
And these are the three biggies: sadness, fear, anger, and they combined create lots of other emotions. And so, what I'm really interested in is helping people get comfortable being with these sensations.
And why
Because,
is that important, first of all?
because, because if I'm trying to manage and control these sensations, I'm trying to manage and control life all the time.
Hmm.
And so I'm, and I can't relax. I can't just be home with moment to moment. And so uh, helping people. And also, these emotions are profoundly intelligent. Anger says, stop, something does not serve me or my people. Sadness says, let go. There's something that's being let go of so you can be with what's new here. Fear says, hey, there's something that needs to get learned. Pay attention. Like, these are intelligent emotions that have a lot of guidance, especially when we're making difficult decisions. So if people aren't accessing those, they're missing so much clarity, which
I
is
love
another
that.
reason why we want to feel them.
I love that. That your emotion, what I'm hearing you say is, in a sense, your emotions are a part of your intelligence. They're a part
Yes.
of your way of knowing. And if you are cutting yourself off from feeling, you're actually cutting yourself off from part of your knowing and part of your intelligence.
Yeah. I was with a pharmaceutical company once that was making a $50 million deal to buy another biotech company. They were just about ready to set on the dotted line. And I'd been working with this team for a while and practicing emotional intelligence. And one guy says, all right, before we do, I don't know what's going on, but I just got to say I'm scared. And somebody else goes, oh, I'm so glad you said so. I was scared too. And then they all go, we're all scared. So then I go, okay, great. There's an intelligence. Something needs to get learned. And somebody goes, before we buy them, I just want to find out about this one part of the science. I just have this little sense I'm not clear about. So they went, found out. Turns out when they learned more, the value of the company was not at all what they thought.
Wow.
And they ended up choosing not to buy the company and saved their own company $50 million. So
Wow.
had they not spoken up, had somebody not just said, my stomach is swirling, I don't know why, but they listened and it paid off. And so, I see that happening all the time with individuals and teams, that if they don't access that, they miss out on so much wisdom.
Now, so one tactic as you know, I'm a father of 4 daughters, and one of the things that I've learned, rightly or wrongly, you might just, shoot a hole in it now, which is fine. It's probably better for my life. I've learned that the body processes fear and excitement in similar ways. And one kind of way you can trick yourself, so to speak, is, like we're going skiing next week, right? And I already know with the 9-year-old, she's going to at some point say, I'm so afraid. And I'm going to say, tell yourself you're excited. And we're going to like do it together. And it worked last year. I'm assuming it's going to work this year. If I go back to your pharma example, actually, probably the last thing you want to do is tell that executive who said, I'm scared, just think you're excited, right?
Right.
So how do you, because sometimes you can almost like judo your emotions, and other times, how do you parse out when to tell yourself you're not afraid, you're excited, versus this is actually legitimate fear that should be honored?
Mm.
And is that whole judo move just baloney and I should just stop doing it?
Well, I remember Katie Hendricks told me fear is just excitement without breath, a certain kind of fear.
Hmm.
So what I usually would do is when somebody says I'm scared, I would just say, just breathe for a minute. And breathe and just see, is that fear or is that excitement?
Hmm.
And breath can help you. And if it's still fear, then you want to say, oh, let's welcome the fear. Of
Hmm.
course you're scared. You don't know what it's like to be on that particular hill,
Yeah.
going in that with that particular snow. That's so intelligent for you to be scared. And could we be scared? Breathe with it, welcome it, and then enjoy the ride of the skiing, go down the hill. And it could be a yes and.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. There's so much there, because even just pausing to ask the question, I immediately go for the trick versus honoring the feeling. As you say, feel all the feelings and say, what might it be? And let's take a moment to assess, and then we can make a decision what we want to do. I think too often, maybe in this just in parenting, probably in other parts of life, I just want to, bulldoze through. It's not about fear. It's let's go, And what you're suggesting is, and I think actually it gets back perhaps to the point, feel all the feelings. It's not about turning it into something else. It's about being present with it. And in a way, it goes back to our earlier part of the conversation too, Diana, of it is. These feelings are, I don't need to wish for what is not, or what, some other thing. This is what is right now, this feeling.
Well, I think we're in the midst of so much collective change, individual and collective change. And systems are old systems are dying, old ways of doing things are dying. And there's an intelligence in, okay, fear is here saying, whoa, how do you navigate when the old ways don't work anymore? And
Mm.
it's so wise. It's like, yes, fear is intelligence saying, learn something. Pay attention. It's not the old way. How do you navigate now? And so I'm a huge advocate of let's all welcome being scared. I'm working with a lot of VCs right now, and they're like, wow, it's not the same game anymore. Like, how are we going to play this game now? And what is the game? And we're not even really sure. And the ones that I see who are embracing their fear are letting themselves sit back, relax, and be in the I'm learning. And they're getting more curious and open and navigating with a lot less stress in an industry that is in, rapid change.
Truly. Yeah. So the other word that you mentioned a moment ago that I had in the back of my mind, I was hoping we would talk about is candor.
Mhm.
And what I would love to learn from you, I had the privilege of having Amy Edmondson on recently, who talks and has written quite eloquently on psychological safety. One of the things that comes up, and I've seen in our community, this question emerge of the value of candor can often be set aside when we emphasize psychological safety. It's not safe to speak the truth, therefore the truth doesn't get spoken. That's kind of like a straw man, I realize. But can you talk about how you preserve psychological safety without sacrificing candor?
Oh, I love this topic so much. Okay. One of the ways that I think groups don't create psychological safety is they don't articulate what is the game we're going to play together? How are we going to do relationship? So they don't name that. And it's kind of like if we were on the soccer field right now and I said, okay, everybody, we're going to play soccer, but I don't really tell you the rules. People are going to be like, is it okay to kick the ball this way? Can I use my hands? Like I'm anxious.
Mhm.
I think psychological safety is I don't know how to play the game. So I think what I do is we come in and work with organizations to say, let's name the game very specifically. So what is candor? How are we all going to co-commit to reveal versus conceal? And if we are, what agreements are we going to make that is a yes to everybody on how we do that feels friendly?
Hmm.
Once we name the game and everybody knows the rules and we all agree, then then there's no what am I supposed to do, because I get it. And then we can just reveal ourselves, because in my experience above the line is I can trust you to be whoever you are. Even if in the moment show up really reactive, I can trust that. And
Yeah.
I can relax because ideally we have agreements in place that I can bring those up to you, and then you can help shift yourself, and then we can come back to a centered place. And then if we can't, we have agreements about what we do if you can't get centered, and how do we go and do relationship from that place. And there's a whole set of agreements there. And so we're all able to navigate with a lot of clarity because we've set up the rules of the game on the front end.
Now, how do you think about advising a team that's looking to create these agreements, say around candor, for example? Because that's as I observe creative, my kind of area of interest is innovation and creativity. And I look at somebody like Ed Catmull and what he did at Pixar with the brain trust and the dailies practice, where candor is there's a constant environment of critique that propels the work forward and
Yes.
refines it and makes it magnificent. What are the agreements that precede
Oh,
that environment?
that's great. Sometimes teams will say, can you come in and teach candor? And I'm like, no, we got to first come in and teach what is radical responsibility, so
Hmm,
that my candor does not have blame in it.
hmm,
So candor with blame is just criticism, and that's not that helpful. So what's it like to really first go, oh, how am I co-creating with you something that's not as ideal as what we would like it to be? And so I have a part to play, you have a part to play. So I first own that first. Secondly, let me get out of being righteous. So anywhere I have a should, shouldn't, have to, then I'm going to be in a narrow state of curiosity.
hmm.
So how do I stay curious when I give you my thoughts and feelings? Maybe I'm not right. I don't know. These are stories I make up. I just want to reveal myself and I'm willing to hold them lightly. And then 3, am I willing to have emotional intelligence? Meaning, am I willing to feel my feelings? But in particular, with candor, would I let it be okay that you might have feelings when I give you this feedback? And I don't need to manage or control you and believe a story like you shouldn't be scared or you shouldn't be angry.
Hmm.
Because if I have those stories, then I'm likely not going to be as candid. So I go teach those 3 things first. Radical responsibility, curiosity, and emotional intelligence come first, then candor.
Hmm.
And then candor can be a lot cleaner.
And how do you build those 3? At what point do you know, okay, now we can layer on candor? What are you looking for as evidence that those first 3 kind of foundational principles have not just been established intellectually, but they're operational?
Yeah. So whenever we come into organizations, we give them practices because we think, come teach a concept and spend a few hours together. It doesn't really take anybody any place new. So we give everybody individual practices in which they're using their devices to remind them to practice multiple times throughout the day. They have a learning partner practice where we give them a script and they sit together for half hour each week in pairs practicing. And then we give them group practices. Whenever we gather for any meeting, we start the meeting with a group practice that helps us practice this. And so we get it embodied. Embodiment is so key. And so we do that for a month. We introduce a concept and then we give them 30 days of individual pair and group practices. And by the end of that month, they're like, okay, we're getting this.
Huh.
And we're seeing the payoffs. We like the results. And then great, now we'll go to the next one. And we give you another month of practice. So usually it's 4 months before we even go into candor.
Wow. Wow. And tell me about the daily, you mentioned your device. I'm a big believer in kind of daily practices and um, introducing what I've heard referred to as an interrupt, that there's these kind of ways, there's these fixed patterns of thinking. And what you have to do is you have to have an interrupt. And notification, a calendar notification can be a great interrupt, right?
Yes.
Can you? That's what I imagined when you said that. But what does that look like? Like, what is someone's device doing when you're establishing a daily practice?
Yeah. So it might be uh, 7 times a day, my phone will pop on and say, if I'm practicing emotional intelligence, for example, it'll say, Diana, pause for a moment. What feeling is here right now? And I make a deal with myself. Whenever my device pops up the question, I have to pause and look.
Hmm.
And I go, God, I wasn't even aware of feelings. Let me look. Oh, I notice I'm feeling a little sad.
Hmm.
Okay, I just take a breath of welcoming my sadness. Okay, on to whatever's next. And then I'm just letting that be a practice that comes in. And so
7 times a day.
7 times a day.
Wow.
Another one I'm using right now is it pops up and it asks, Diana, is there any way this moment could be even more exquisite?
Hmm.
And I pause and go, well, let me see. And I always can find something like, oh, something could be a little, and it helps me get aware of what is exquisite.
One thing I'd be curious about is overload. I
Mm.
find there's only so many things one can truly attend to,
Yeah.
before you just go, I just got to silence the notifications. If, I imagine 7 times 7, if I'm getting 49 notifications a day, I'm just like, put my phone on airplane mode, right? So how do you, but I kind of got the impression that you gave me the impression of almost a rotation.
Yes.
There are, perhaps whatever the number is, there's 10 things I want to be aware of. I can't attend to all of them in any one day, but over the course of a season, maybe I'll continue to revisit them. Is that the case?
Yeah, one at a time typically. So
Yeah.
I'm just getting only 7 notifications, and it really is doubling down on one particular skill to really anchor it.
Hmm.
And then ideally, it becomes a way of life so that I don't need to have something reminding me.
Yeah.
I can say as a regular practice like, "Oh yeah," it just becomes habit.
Hmm. Okay, so I want to shift gears a little bit because I know one of your um, one of certainly one of the commitments, but I think one of your areas of mastery is in the area of play.
Mhm.
And I want to shift to play because it seems at all. I mean, we've been talking about candor. We've been talking about radical responsibility, right? These are all, we all furrow our brows and go, yes, right, right. And then we say play and people go, wait, hang on. Is this the same podcast, right? So talk to me for a moment, if you will, about why is play so important? And I have my own thoughts on it. I'm happy to riff with you, but give me your take on why is play so important?
Okay. Drama is so damn entertaining. You know, the biggest heroes and villains and victims in these blockbuster films, everybody wants to come. And we have lots of drama shows on TV and in the news, and it's addicting. So one of the things that we know is what trumps drama for entertainment is play. Ask kids, what's your favorite part of school? What do they say? Recess.
Mm-hmm.
All mammals and human beings learn best through play. We are learning children. Some of the newest research is showing children might learn 40 times faster through play. So play is fun. It's entertaining. It helps us learn. And so I'm just a huge fan of play. And so how do we play with everything? How do we have fun? Keep it light, not get so serious, because the moment things aren't funny, you're going to suffer.
Right.
You know, and, you know, there are some really big, serious issues going on in the world. But if we get too, this shouldn't be this way, if we get too heavy, it's just not, we're not going to find solutions. We're just going to repeat it all. So play is a really helpful way to help us learn. So I'll give you an example of candor and play. So I had one of my colleagues, we'd had a conversation, and apparently she had felt hurt about something I said, and it was a little vulnerable for her to tell me. So she playfully calls me and goes, this is Carol Ann. Now, Grace probably wouldn't want to call you and tell you this because she's a little shy about it, but she got a little hurt with that last conversation. I just thought maybe you'd want to know. And so I'm just giving you the lowdown here as as an ally for you. And I said, oh, thank you, Carol Ann. That's so great. And when we hang up, and it was a playful way to get vulnerable. And so then I call Grace back and say, hey, Grace, I hear that maybe you got hurt, and I want to check in with you. And she's like, yeah, I was hurt. And we had a candid conversation. Right. Or my husband and I might be frustrated with something, and so I'll turn it into a country song. So I'll tell him the words, but it'll sing it as a song. You're not doing those dishes again, and it was like funny and fun. And how do we bring some light to it? And then from there, take responsibility for, hey, how are we co-creating this again? Because it's not really exquisite for me to keep hassling you about the dishes, and what do we need to do about it?
Right.
But play helps not make it, because otherwise it's like, seriously, the dishes again, and then that's not going to take us any place new.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, to me, it just strikes me that exquisite, and like, how might this be more exquisite? I think play is probably 90% of the time. The answer is, could we bring some fun in?
Yeah.
I had Brendan Boyle who on the podcast a few years ago, and he created the Play Lab at IDEO. And one of the things he said, I'll ask you the question first so that you can think about it, is how do you know if there's a sufficient play in a team environment? And what Brendan told, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. What Brendan said is, if I walk by a brainstorm and people aren't laughing, I know there's a problem.
Yeah.
And laughter, he said, is just kind of like the simple thing that he's measuring. Are there ways that you assess whether there's sufficiency or a deficiency of play in a team, in your life, in a situation?
It's a feeling state. It's like there's a little bit of a lightness of being that you can feel. I think laughter, joy, are great indications that we're playing, and that if there's not a lot of laughter, that probably there's some way we're holding things too tightly or too seriously. I think that's a great indicator.
Yeah.
Also, people all have parts of themselves that they don't either own. I am so not like that, like them,
Right.
or they own it and they don't like it about themselves. And so one of the signature events I hold in my trainings is what's called a persona party. And so I might say, okay, Jeremy, what's a part of yourself that you don't like? And so already I've heard, I don't like being the late guy.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, I don't want to be seen as irresponsible. So I
Right.
might go, okay, tonight you're going to play Mr. Irresponsible. And you're going to dress up. And I have like this elaborate costume collection that helps everybody out in the world know. And I take a group of people out publicly to dinner in their costumes and play out the part.
Mm.
So I
Mm.
would have you be as irresponsible as you possibly could all night with the staff at the restaurant and whatever, and they're in on the joke. And you get to have an experience of letting this part out of you that you usually have shame or guilt about, and
Hmm.
free yourself up and actually see there's a high side to that part that you actually
Wow.
want to incorporate.
That there's a strength there,
There's a
perhaps.
strength there. And
Wow, that's cool.
and
Yeah.
you can't see it if you don't play with it. And
Interesting.
so I do a lot of playing with parts. And so I do play also, like, there's a CEO who gets feedback that he gets too aggressive and he gets too bullyish. So his team has a game with him where they say, hey, looks like the boss is coming online. So he picks up this construction hat that he has in the meeting room, puts it on and goes, that's right, I'm the boss. And he makes it bigger for a minute so he can see, oh, I didn't intend to do this, but I can see I got a little into this unconsciously. He
Wow.
makes it bigger for a moment, plays with it. Everybody relaxes. He can take off the hat and move on with the business.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one thing you're reminding me of, Becky Marotta, who's the head of the Billions Institute, and she led the 100,000 Homes campaign to address homelessness. She's an
Oh, yeah.
incredible leader. You know, Becky, she's
Yeah.
remarkable. One of the things she told me was that she has developed a tactic, because she said she was getting shots in the public domain, by Bush's head of his homelessness czar, kind of tried to take down the 100,000 lives campaign or homes campaign. And she said that one thing she has learned to do is just magnify it, because then you kind of bring absurdity to it. And it's like, I can't believe this guy's doing. And then she said, my whole team will just amplify it to 11. That's kind of what you're doing with your dinner party. You
Exactly.
kind of see the
Exaggeration
absurdity
is a
of it.
fantastic form of play.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So one thing I'm just mindful of, there's so many things I want to ask you about, but I want a topic that I've been probably the topic I've been most excited just selfishly to dive into is Enneagram.
Mhm.
Because as you know, I'm new to the Enneagram game, and maybe for folks who don't know, and I know you're something of an expert. So what is the Enneagram? Why is it valuable? And then I have a couple of specific follow-up questions. But why is this a meaningful tool in a leader's or even just a contributor's toolkit?
Okay. Enneagram is a tool of self-awareness to help you understand what causes you to get reactive. And what are some of the strategies you use to protect yourself? So we know it's about 3,000 years old. We're still learning about its history. And there's not a lot of science yet on it. So some people can poo-poo it. And we at the Conscious Leadership Group have decided we have so much evidence to its value that we're going to stand for it regardless of the science. And we acknowledge that. But it is a model not like others like Myers-Briggs or DISC. Those are personality tests in which they're looking at what is your personality, which honestly doesn't change very much. You can't change that.
Hmm.
Enneagram is looking at your reactivity, which you have a lot of ability to change. And so there are 9 types. We're all a little bit of all of them, but one of them is our core type that showed up earlier in our lives, and that is our type for the rest of our lives. And it has both gifts and shadows. And as you work through the shadow, that shadow becomes a great gift as well. And you become more present, experience more well-being, and relax more into life as you use the model.
And so maybe we could start with, if you're willing to share, what is your type and what have you learned as you have kind of leaned into the gift and the shadow that becomes a gift itself?
Great. Okay. So I'm a type 8. It's called the Challenger.
Hmm.
And me, Donald Trump, and Martin Luther King Jr. are all type 8s.
What a
So
crew.
you can see we all have very different personalities. So it's not about our personality, but in the background, we all had a voice that said, the world is a dangerous place. You've got to be strong, powerful, in charge, and take care of those who can't take care of themselves and protect them.
Hmm.
And so we all have ways that we're working with that voice. And if
Okay.
you really believe it, the world's a dangerous place, and they're going to come and take our jobs, and they're drug dealers, and they're going to hurt us. And well, then you're going to create a reactive pattern of fear that's going to want to dominate and control and not be very collaborative. And that makes sense to me. I can understand why Donald Trump would have that reaction.
Yeah.
He makes so much sense to me. Whereas if I can work with that and learn, that's actually not true. The world is a friendly place. And you can learn how to experience it being a friendly place by being friendly yourself. Helps a lot. So I used to, be somebody for whom people would say, you're kind of scary. And the world looked a little aggressive toward me. And I learned I'm part of the creation of that by my mindset. So when I started to experience the world's a friendly place, suddenly everybody's so wonderful, and I get so much support, and I'm relaxed, and people aren't scared of me anymore. And so I still get to keep the gifts of the type, which is I do have a lot of confidence and power, and I can assert myself well, and those are all gifts of it. But I don't have that fear response nearly as much anymore. So the reactivity settles down quite a bit.
You're reminding me of a quote. We see the world not as it is, but as we are.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So one thing that you said to me when we were chatting before we went live was that Enneagram types can actually even be useful in how you think about parenting your children. And parenting is a topic of, very near and dear relevance to my life right now. I had Jennifer Brenny Wallace on the show recently talking about the toxic achievement culture especially in college admissions and things like that. She just wrote a book called Never Enough, which is a fabulous kind of book that is really more about parents than students actually, and what we do to contribute to that. So I've kind of dipped my toes in some of this, but I'd love to hear what are your, and feel free, you can use me as a laboratory if you want, but how have you found it useful to leverage Enneagram in parenting? What are some tips that you might recommend? Somebody like me who I want to be as wonderful of a father as I can be. And I recognize each of my children have unique gifts and shadows, if you will. How do I think about bringing Enneagram to bear on the kind of the custom interactions that I have with each of them?
Yeah, it's such a great question. What I find is a lot of us parent the way we'd like to be parented based on our own type. So, for example, I'm an 8. I like to be challenged. That actually helps me grow when people are direct and challenging. And I was being direct and challenging with my children, and it was not so helpful for them. They were different types, and that style actually kept them more reactive rather than less. And so I got a sense of what my daughter's type was at the age of 10 and went to somebody who was that type and asked them to coach me. And I verbatim went into her room one day and did exactly what the coach told me. And my daughter stops, she pauses, she looks at me and she goes, okay, whoever you talk to, it's totally working. Keep going. And one of the things I learned is my daughter's highly emotional and she really needs her emotions validated. And I'm not wired that way. And I'm a little whoa, that's a lot. But when I didn't make it a problem that's how she works things through and welcomed it, then, she felt supported and nurtured. And I also learned that each type has messages that they're giving themselves, negative messages. And it's really helpful as a parent when you counter the message with the opposite. And if you can know what that message is they're often dealing with, then you give a counter that helps them relax and not believe that story so much inside of themselves.
Wow. So I have a hunch for this, but I want to test my own assumptions here. Knowing that we're all limited by time and attention and all that stuff. Let's say I can't think about all 4 right now. Do you have any thoughts of which of my children should I start with? Taking an Enneagram oriented approach. What are heuristics I could use to go, this is the relationship in need of special, attention?
I would say pick the one where you feel the most reactive.
So, and define reactive. My reactivity, their reactivity.
Yours.
Okay.
Start with yours. Like who do you feel the most like, where do you have your aversions? Whose behavior bugs you the most?
Hmm.
Because the children can pick up on your aversions and they can take that in deeply.
Hmm.
And so the more you can start to understand, what am I so averse to over there? What's that about my type? How am I not understanding their type that's creating these aversions? And then if I can relax that, then there's a connection that can start to happen where that child gets to feel more accepted, which is so, so key for them.
Hmm. Hmm. Uh, this is something that I need to dig into. Are there resources for someone who says, I want to try? I mean, my go-to right now is to ask ChatGPT to be my Enneagram coach. Like, is that my best bet? Or what do you recommend for a dad who wants, I see a relationship where there's an aversion, where there's a reactivity on my part, not hers. How do where do I go to learn more?
Great. Well, first of all, I think it would be valuable for you to get typed. And the challenge with Enneagram is there's not a good typing system out there in any written form. So usually you need to take one of these tests and they kind of give you pointers. But it's really helpful if you can talk to somebody for whom their gift is to help you discover your own type,
Hmm.
by asking you lots of questions and making sure that you're responding to the questions from the right mindset.
Hmm.
So getting yourself typed will be helpful, and then learning all about your own type first. What causes you, where do you get threatened, what's going on over there, because that in of itself will help you start changing your parenting right away.
Hmm.
And what are your own superpowers, because each type does have superpowers, and how do you lean into those, because there's a certain gift you have as a father in your own type that you want to keep bringing forward more.
Hmm.
And then as your children get to a certain age where you might be able to assess what their type is, or they assess what they think their type is, then you can start to learn. There's books out on parenting and Enneagram. Um, the Enneagram, The Wisdom of the Enneagram is a really good classic book that's been out for a long time by Russ Hudson and Riso. And then also another book I really like is called The Complete Enneagram, and by Beatrice Chestnut, who's here in the Bay Area.
Hmm.
And I think those are really good, solid um, overviews of each of the types that people can go to.
Hmm.
And there is so much good content online now. Enneagram is one of the fastest personal growth tools, rising all across the world all at the same time.
Wow.
And so there's lots and lots of resources. And I actually encourage people to go to watch Enneagram panels. And it's where you watch a group of 4 or 5 people who are all the same type be interviewed and talk. So you get to sense of, oh, I get to see the type
Hmm.
that shows up consistently, even though the personalities are quite different.
Right, the different personalities.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, last question, and it's a subject change. I wanna talk zone of genius for 1 second,
Okay.
because I know this is kind of core to your, worldview and life view. Can you tell us what is zone of genius? Why is it important, and how do we discover it?
Great questions. I love this topic too. Zone of genius is that thing you've done since you were young. If I interviewed your family of origin, they'd say, "Oh, Diana was doing that when she was young," or "Jeremy was doing that when they." We saw that early on. It's a natural gift, and when you do it, it feels like time and space go away.
Hmm.
And you love to do it. And the challenge with identifying it is it seems so natural. Doesn't everybody have this? Because this is not something I worked on. You know, I joke like it's like telling a fish what a good swimmer it is, and the fish is like, "What are you talking about? Like,
Right.
I'm just being me."
Hmm.
And so zones of excellence is the next stage down. And those are things that I'm really good at, but I had to work at it. I had to really build, like, it's hard. And time and space don't necessarily go away. I do zone of excellence because I get paid well or people are really grateful. But
Hmm.
on my own free time, if it were just me and myself, I'd go back to zone of genius.
Hmm.
And why it matters is it is where your greatest gifts are to give to the world. It's where you're going to experience the most joy because it's rejuvenating. When you do zone of genius, energy comes back at you.
Hmm.
Whereas zones of excellence or competence, you have to give more than you get back, and it's not sustainable.
Hmm.
And so helping people find their zone of genius is people love being able to start to design their lives where at least 50% of your day is in your zone of genius. And my team and I, we do a lot of that. People come to us to help. We help them figure out what is that. And you need a community around you usually to understand what your zone of genius is, because you need a reflection, because like I said before, it's kind of a blind spot.
Right. Are there any, I mean, you mentioned family being a good mirror. Are there any other kind of shorthand mirrors that if you want to lean on a handful, what are the go-to questions for someone to discover?
We have it in our book under the Zone of Genius chapter. We have the questions that we use with our clients. And if I were coaching you, I'd say, okay, I want you to send this out to at least 30 people who know you from all walks of life. And that's key. Get some like college friends, or get somebody who knew you in high school, get maybe a neighbor you spend amount of time with, get your siblings, your cousins, your colleagues, new and old, get a wide variety of people, because it'll help you understand they all see it, even though they know you from different times in your life and different aspects of your life. And that's helpful. And you ask them all the same questions, and it takes them about 10 minutes to respond. And most of them are really curious, like, oh, I want to learn more about this. So it's usually something that they enjoy talking about. And then you get this real like, oh, wow, they're all pointing, most of them, 80% of them pointing to the same thing.
Okay. So the book that you're referring to, obviously, 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, for those who don't know, it's an excellent book. I've had this recommended by so many people to me. I've enjoyed diving into it. Diana, thank you so much for making time today. It's such a pleasure to get to spend the last hour with you. Is there anything that you want to say in closing to folks?
Just give yourself a lot of compassion for being human. Just let it be okay that we are as human as we are, and make lots of space for that and not make it wrong.
Maybe as my interpretation of that for myself is withhold putting a narrative on the black and white footage of some part of your day today.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Thank you, Diana. And thank you everyone for joining us. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Okay.